Hi everyone, welcome back to Zero to Hero PHP course. And in this series, I'll be talking about PHP functions. Now, the real power of PHP comes from its function. And apart from these built-in functions, you can actually create your own customized functions. So, first of all, let's talk about how we can create user-defined functions. That is, how can we create our own functions apart from PHP's built-in function? Function is a block of statements that can be used repeatedly in a program. So a function will not execute automatically when a page loads. The function will only execute when you call the function. So how do we create a function? A user-defined function declaration starts with the word function. So when we want to create a function, all we need to do is just put the name function, and then your function name. So let's say that our function name, which we'll be using in the course of this tutorial, will be say hello. So we want to say hello to our users, and then followed by these curly braces. And here, in the middle of this curly braces, we're going to put our code, which we'll want to execute. So here, we'll just say hello. And this is going to be our first function. So now if we save this page and we refresh, you will see that we have nothing inside of this page because the function cannot call itself. We need to call this function before it executes. So how can we call this function? All we need to do to call the function is just use the function name. So we're just going to put the function name here, and this is how we call the function. Right here, we are calling this function. So if we refresh this page, we get say hello because we are calling the function, and the function is actually saying hello to the user. And this is how to create a custom or a user-defined function in PHP. Now let's talk about function arguments. What are arguments, or what are function arguments? Now, an argument is just like a variable. Arguments are specified after the function name. Inside of this parentheses, which we have after the function name, inside of this parentheses, this is where we pass our argument. So let us say that we pass first name, okay? If we want to pass one single argument, you don't need a comma. But if you want to pass multiple arguments, you will need a comma. So let's say first name and email. And here, we can just say echo my first name. My first name is first name. And my email ID is email. And then let's give it a break. So here, how do we do this? If we save this now and we still refresh, we're going to get an error because we are passing parameters, we are passing arguments into our function. And while we are trying to call the function, we are not giving it the argument that is expected. So if you read this error now, you get fatal error, uncut argument, count error. Too few arguments to function say hello. Zero pass. We pass zero arguments while our function is expecting two arguments. So how do we pass the two arguments to our function call? All we need to do is give it our first name, which we say Joe, the comma, and then we give it the email ID. So we say Joe at gmail.com. And if we save this and refresh this page, you'll get my first name is Joe and my email ID is joe at gmail.com. This is a typical example of function argument. We are passing two arguments into our function. And the good thing about this is that you can call this function as many times as possible. So if we come here and call this function and say this, Let us say this, we want to change this to Esther, and we want to change this to David. And then you refresh this page. You see we are getting my first name, David, my first name, Esther, my first name. So that is, you can call this function as many times as possible. And all you need to do is just write it once and call it as many times as possible. As long as you're passing the right argument into the function, then you're good to go. PHP was a loosely typed language until recent versions where the strict type is introduced into PHP. So what does that mean? What it means is, if you notice this, we did not tell PHP the kind or the type of data which we are expecting. We just passed the arguments. We didn't tell it if it's a string or if it's an integer, because PHP automatically converts, or PHP automatically does this for us. It automatically converts the data type for us. So, but in the strict type, in the strict declaration, we have to make sure, we have to declare the type of the information or the data that PHP will be expecting. So to specify the strict type, we need to set the declare keyword. So here, if we want to set the strict type, we just declare, and then we say strict, okay, and then we say types, and we set the value to 1. You see that? Here we have actually set the strict type. We want to perform a calculation with this. So let's say age, okay, and then here let's tell it again that we are expecting the string, and let's say here. So here we are telling PHP the type of the data type we are expecting from the function call. Here, all right. But here, let us say that in this place we're passing integer, and then here, let's just say here is 1986. If we save this and refresh our page, you can see here that we are getting an error. Why? It says here must be type of integer, but string is given. So this is a string, and because we have the strict declaration, it must be an integer. So if we change this now, if we remove this and we save and refresh, you will see that it works. But if we give it a string, it's not going to work. Why? Because it's expecting an integer as an input, as an argument. It's expecting an integer, but we are passing a string. And that is where the strict declaration comes in PHP. Now, this is a good practice because it helps you to do things in the intended way to get the intended result. So if you pass a wrong argument, it tells you immediately that you're passing a wrong argument. And that's a good thing. That's a good one. Now, there are default argument values. Okay? Now, what do we mean by default argument values? Default argument values in the sense that we can actually do something like this. Right here, we can give this a default value, like 1986. And if we still refresh this page, it still works. You see that? Despite the fact that we're just passing one argument into this function call, and the function itself is expecting 2 arguments, but we have given it a default value here, and that is why our code is not breaking. Okay? So that is default argument values in PHP. Now let's talk about return statements or return values. How to return values in our function. In this place, instead of using the echo statement, we can use the return statement. Return statement. Now, what does the return statement do for us in PHP? The return statement is used to return a value or the result of a function. If we remove this return statement from here and we refresh this page, you will see that PHP does not know what to do with this result, with these values here. It doesn't know what to do with it because we remove the echo statement and we remove the return statement. But if we put the return statement here, if we put it back here, okay, and then we come here and say echo say hello, and then we refresh this page, you're going to get the result. Why? Because let us say return, okay, and let's put age multiplied by year. All right. You see that? With the return statement, it returns these expressions, the result of these expressions to us. That is what the return statement helps you to do in PHP. We have return type declaration for your return statement. So you can actually tell PHP what type of results you're expecting. And to declare a type for the function return, all you need to do is add a colon at the right before the opening curly brace. So how do we do that? All you need to do is insert a colon here and then pass the data type which you're expecting. So here I could actually say I'm expecting an integer. Okay, and if I refresh this page, I still have the same result. But if I come here and say I'm expecting a string, and then I refresh, you'll see we get an error because this result is an integer, and then we are telling PHP that we are expecting a string. So that is a return type declaration in PHP. You can tell your program what type of results you are expecting. Now, we can specify a different return type than the argument types, but make sure that the return is the correct type. How do we specify the kind of return which we want? So now, here, where we have a string, when we put a string here, what we can do here is that we can cast this result into a string. Okay? So we can actually cast this integer and make it a string. And it result into a string. We cast it into a string because we're telling PHP that we are expecting a string and we are casting the result of this expression inside of a string. If you've not watched the tutorial for the typecasting, please go to the previous tutorial of data types and you will see typecasting. So we have successfully cast the result of this expression into a string, and we're telling PHP that we are expecting a string as a return value. This is passing argument types and return typecasting. Now, we can also pass arguments by reference in PHP. And what do we mean by passing arguments by reference? Let's take an example. Arguments are usually passed by values, okay? Which means that a copy of the value is used in the function, and the variable that was passed in the function cannot be changed. Now, when a function argument is passed by reference, changes to the argument also change the variable that was passed in. Now, to turn a function argument into a reference, you should use the AND operator. So, what are we going to do here? What we can do here is that we want to the AND operator should be the first and then the value. So let's put value here. Okay, let's clear this. Clear the casting. So we are putting this, and then we will just say this value which we are getting Okay, just do something with it with 50. Okay, and here all we just need to do is I want to declare a variable here. I'll declare a variable, I'll call it number, okay, and I'll give it a value of 10. All right, and here I'll just call our function. I'll say hello function, okay, and I'm just going to pass the variable inside of it. All right, so what am I doing? What I'm doing is I'm passing by reference, and then I'm working on it here. I declare this variable, I pass it into this function by reference, and then I'm echoing it. And if I save this and I refresh, you get 60. Okay, it's been added to this 50 because we are passing this as number to this function. This function receives this argument by reference, and it is adding it to this number. That is what is happening here, and it's as simple as that. That is, we are passing argument by reference.